Welcome back to the deep dive. Tonight, we're going to do things a little differently. Usually when we meet here, we're unpacking complex ideas with a lot of energy, maybe, helping you prep for a meeting or understand a new piece of technology.
Right.
But looking at the stack of sources we've pulled for today, Herodotus, modern military analysis, archaeological surveys, we realize this story demands a different pace. It demands a lower gear.
It really does.
Yeah.
Because while this is technically a piece of military history, the sources suggest it's actually a story about, well, the human spirit.
I see.
It's about stillness. It's about waiting. And it's about a very specific kind of quiet courage that doesn't scream, but just simply stands firm.
Exactly. So if you're listening to this, maybe you're winding down for the day. Maybe you just need a break from the noise of the present. We invite you to get comfortable. Dim the lights if you can. We are going to transport you back to 480 BCE to a narrow, dusty road in northern Greece, to the Battle of Thermopylae.
And it is a story most people think they know. The 300, the shields, the shouting. But when you really look at the texts, at the history, the reality is far more interesting than the myth.
How so?
It isn't just about strength. It's about geometry, psychology, and a decision made in the quiet of the morning.
So let's set the scene using the timeline we've established. It's been 10 years since the Battle of Marathon. We've covered that before, where King Darius of Persia tried to invade Greece and was stopped.
Right.
Now the calendar has turned. Darius is gone. But his son, Xerxes, is on the throne, and he has not forgotten.
No, he hasn't. Xerxes isn't just seeking to win a battle. He's seeking to settle a score. He is looking for revenge for his father's defeat.
So this is personal.
Deeply. And looking at the logistical records, the supply depots they built, the bridges they engineered, Xerxes isn't just planning a campaign. He's planning a migration.
The scale is... It's difficult to even visualize.
It is. The ancient historian Herodotus gives us numbers that are frankly, well, impossible. He claimed millions of men.
Millions, yeah.
But even when modern historians strip away the exaggeration and look at the logistics, how much water, how much grain, they estimate Xerxes brought between 100,000 and 200,000 soldiers.
Wow.
Plus a massive navy shadowing them along the coast.
Just pause on that for a second. 200,000 men. In the ancient world, that is an incomprehensible number. It's a moving city.
It was described as a force of nature, a flood. The sources tell us that when the army marched, the ground shook.
I can imagine.
And when they stopped to camp, they drank entire rivers dry. Literally, the local water sources would just vanish.
So this creates a sense of absolute inevitability.
Completely. If you are a Greek city-state, you aren't looking at an enemy army. You are looking at a tidal wave coming to wash you away.
And facing this tidal wave, the Greek response seems almost pitifully small. We have the breakdown of forces here in the notes. It wasn't a unified nation-state army, was it?
No, it was a coalition.
Yeah.
A very fragile alliance. You have to remember, these Greek cities, Athens, Sparta, Thebes, they often hated each other.
No, they fought all the time.
They spent decades fighting one another. But the sheer scale of the Persian threat forced them to lock shields. They knew they couldn't fight in the open.
Yeah.
If they met the Persians on a wide plain, they would be surrounded and destroyed in an hour.
So geography becomes the most important weapon they have. They need a funnel.
A funnel, yes.
They need a place where the Persian numbers simply don't count.
And that is where Thermopylae comes in. It's a name that echoes through history, but the reality of the place is quite physical. The name itself, Thermopylae, translates to the hot gates.
The hot gates, it sounds almost mythical.
It does, but it's literal. There were natural hot springs nearby that smelled of sulfur. But more importantly, looking at the topographical maps of 480 BCE, the coastline looked very different than it does today.
Oh, really?
Today, silt has filled it in, so the pass is wide. But back then, it was a narrow track.
Can you describe the dimensions for us?
Imagine a track with a sheer drop into the sea on one side, the Malian Gulf and near vertical limestone cliffs on the other. At the middle gate, the narrowest point where the battle actually happened, the sources say the pass was only wide enough for a single wagon to pass, maybe 15 meters wide.
That is the key insight. It's a funnel. It doesn't matter if Xerxes has 200,000 men or 1 million men. If the road is only 15 meters wide, he can only pack maybe a few dozen men into the front line at any one time.
Exactly. The geography nullifies the advantage of the empire. It forces the giant to fight on the terms of the few. It turns a battle of maneuver into a grinding, head-on shoving match.
And that is exactly what the Greeks wanted.
Precisely.
So who is standing in this pass? Who steps forward to hold the gates? We know about the Spartans, of course, but looking at the troop manifest, they weren't alone.
No, they weren't, and it's so important we correct the record on that. The total Greek force was about 7,000 soldiers.
7,000.
A mix from different city-states, Mantineans, Tegeans, Arcadians, Phocians, Thebans, and Thespians. But the leadership, the steel spine of this resistance, that came from Sparta.
Mm.
They were led by one of the two Spartan kings, Leonidas.
And the Spartans, I mean, they were different.
Very different. In the ancient world, most soldiers were farmers or artisans who picked up a spear when war came. The Spartans were professionals.
Right.
From childhood, their entire existence was engineered for war. They were trained to move as one, to endure pain, and crucially, to never retreat.
There is a detail in the records about the specific men Leonidas chose for this mission. He didn't just take the 300 best fighters in Sparta. He had a specific criteria, didn't he?
He did. This is one of those details that adds such a heavy emotional weight to the story. Leonidas handpicked 300 men, but the requirement was that they had to be fathers with living sons.
Fathers with living sons, why? Why that specific condition?
Because Leonidas was a pragmatist. He knew the prophecy from the oracle at Delphi that either Sparta would fall or a Spartan king would die.
So he knew.
He knew on some level that this was likely a suicide mission. He wanted men who had already established their lineage.
So if they fell, their family line would not be extinguished.
Exactly. They were securing their legacy before they even left Sparta. They were walking toward their deaths with their house in order.
It changes the way you see them. These aren't just faceless warriors or adrenaline junkies. They are fathers.
Yes.
They are men with families waiting at home, and they march to the hot gates, knowing they might never see them again.
It adds a layer of solemnity to the march. They weren't running toward glory blindly. They were walking toward duty with their eyes wide open.
So the stage is set. You have the hot gates. You have the sea on one side, the mountains on the other. You have 7,000 Greeks led by 300 Spartan fathers blocking the way. And then the flood arrives.
The Persians appear. And the visual contrast must have been terrifying. On one side, the glitter and noise of the massive Persian army stretching as far as the eye could see. The dust cloud alone would have signaled their arrival hours before they were seen. On the other side, just a small, silent wall of bronze.
Xerxes actually waits, doesn't he? He doesn't attack immediately.
He waits for 4 days. He sets up camp and just waits. He assumes the Greeks will run away when they see the size of his army. He actually sends a scout to ride up and see what the Spartans are doing.
And the report he gets back must have been strange.
Baffling to him.
What were they doing?
They were combing their hair and doing calisthenics.
It sounds absurd. An army of 200,000 is watching you and you're fixing your hair.
Xerxes laughed, but a Greek exile in his camp told him, "You don't understand. When Spartans prepare to die, they groom themselves."
Whoa.
It wasn't vanity, it was a ritual. It was a sign that they were ready to end it right there. A display of absolute calm in the face of annihilation.
So on the 5th day, the patience runs out. Xerxes orders the attack. And this is where we need to get into the mechanics of the fight. Why did 7,000 men hold off so many? It wasn't just bravery. It was physics.
It comes down to the equipment mismatch. The Greeks fought in a phalanx formation. Think of a solid wall of bronze.
A wall of bronze.
Each man carried a large, round shield, the aspis. It covered his left side and the right side of the man next to him. They were interlocked.
So they are literally a single unit.
A single armored organism. They wore bronze helmets, bronze breastplates, and greaves on their legs. Now contrast that with the Persians.
Okay.
The Persians were built for speed and mobility in the open deserts of Asia. They wore cloth tunics, they carried wicker shields woven wood, and they had shorter spears.
So when they clash in that narrow space...
It's a slaughter. The Persians rush in, but their spears can't penetrate the Greek bronze. Meanwhile, the Greek spears, which are longer, are tearing through the wicker shields and cloth armor.
So they can't even get close.
They couldn't get close enough to use their swords. They were just crashing against a metal wall.
The sources describe it not really as a sword fight, but as a shoving match.
Bouthismos. That's the Greek word for it, the push. The rear ranks of the phalanx push the front ranks forward with their shields. It's pure physics. The Greeks were heavier, more armored, and anchored by the terrain. The Persian numbers actually worked against them here. The men in the back pushed the men in the front onto the Greek spears. They were crushing their own soldiers against the Greek line.
It went on for days like this. You can just imagine the exhaustion, the heat, the smell of the springs mixed with the dust. But for 2 days, the Persians couldn't break them.
Xerxes was watching this from a throne he had set up on a nearby hill. He must have been in disbelief.
I'm sure.
He has the greatest army in the world, and he is being stopped by a few thousand men. The sources say he jumped up from his throne 3 times in terror for his army.
So he escalates, he decides to stop playing around, he plays his trump card.
He sends in the Immortals.
The name alone is intimidating.
It was meant to be. This was an elite unit of 10,000 soldiers, the best of the best in the Persian Empire.
Okay.
They were called Immortals because they maintained a constant strength. If one fell, another immediately took his place, so the number never seemed to diminish. They were silent, terrifying professionals.
So Xerxes sends them in, thinking this is the end of it. The Immortals will clear the pass.
But even they failed. They charged the wall of bronze, and the same physics applied. Their weapons were still too short, their armor was still too light. The Spartans actually used a tactic against them. They would feign a retreat, turn their backs, and run. The Immortals would break formation to chase them, shouting, thinking they had won.
And then,
in unison, the Spartans would spin around and smash into the disorganized Persians. It was a masterclass in discipline.
So for 2 days, the pass held. The strategy was working perfectly. The geography was doing its job. It feels like a miracle, a triumph of discipline over brute force.
And that is the tragedy of Thermopylae. They didn't lose the battle. They were winning the battle. They were defeated by a map.
We have to talk about Ephialtes.
Ephialtes. His name became synonymous with nightmare in the Greek language later on. He was a local Greek man. And for reasons the sources attribute to greed, hoping for a reward from the king, he went to Xerxes.
And he had something more valuable than soldiers. He had information.
He knew the land. He told Xerxes that the hot gates weren't the only way. There was a secret, a small, rough goat path called the Anopeia Path.
Oh, no.
It wound up through the mountains, high above the pass, and came down on the other side.
It's such a devastating betrayal. The entire Greek strategy relied on that one choke point, and suddenly that advantage is gone.
Under the cover of darkness, the Persians moved. They took the path. Leonidas had stationed about 1,000 Phocian soldiers up there to guard it, just in case.
Right.
But in the dark, hearing the leaves crunching under thousands of feet, the Phocians panicked. They retreated to a nearby hill to make a stand. But the Persians just ignored them. They marched right past.
They weren't there for the Phocians.
They were there to close the trap on the Spartans.
And this brings us to the morning of the 3rd day. The scouts come running to Leonidas. They tell him the Persians are behind them. The trap has snapped shut.
This is the moment of decision. This is where the legend is really forged. Leonidas looks at the situation. He knows the battle is lost. He knows they're going to be surrounded and killed.
He has a choice to make. He has the coalition army. If they all stay, they all die.
Exactly. And the bulk of that army, the allies from the other city-states, they are needed for the future defense of Greece. So Leonidas makes a command decision. He orders the main force to retreat.
Right.
He tells them to leave, to live, to fight another day. It was an act of strategic mercy.
But he doesn't go with them.
No, he cannot. The laws of Sparta were very clear. A Spartan does not retreat. You return with your shield or on it.
Win or die.
To run would be a fate worse than death for him. But there's a strategic element, too.
He needs to buy time.
Yes. If everyone runs at once, the Persian cavalry will run them down in the open. Someone has to stay. Someone has to hold the door open so the others can escape.
So the 300 stay. But this is the part of the story that often gets left out of the movies, and I think it's crucial we include it. They weren't the only ones who stayed.
No, and this is perhaps the most heartbreaking part. About 700 Thespians and 400 Thebans also refused to leave.
The Thespians. Tell us about them. They weren't super soldiers like the Spartans.
Not at all. They were citizens, democrats. They weren't bred for war. And unlike the Spartans, they had no law forcing them to stay.
So they could have left?
They could have left with the others and kept their honor. But their leader, Thermopylae, reportedly said they would not leave the Spartans to die alone. They chose to stay.
Wow.
They chose to die purely out of loyalty and solidarity. It is perhaps the most underrated act of sacrifice in the entire war.
The sun rises on that final day. The allies are gone. The Persians are closing in from the front and the back. The silence of the waiting is over.
The sources describe this final phase as incredibly gritty. There was no more phalanx, no more careful formation. The Greeks marched out into the wider part of the pass to meet the Persians, trying to kill as many as they could before the end.
It wasn't a tactical battle anymore. It was a brawl.
It was sheer will. Herodotus writes that their spears eventually shattered. When the spears broke, they drew their swords.
And when the swords broke,
They used their hands, they used their teeth, they fought like wild animals.
Leonidas fell early in the fighting, didn't he?
He did. And a furious struggle broke out over his body. The Spartans pushed the Persians back 4 times, purely by shoving, just to recover their king's body.
They didn't want the Persians to take it.
Exactly. But the numbers were finally too much.
Yeah.
Eventually, yes. The surviving Greeks, the few that were left, retreated to a small hillock. The Persians, perhaps weary of trying to fight these men hand to hand, held back. They surrounded the hill, and then they just rained arrows down on them.
Blocking out the sun.
Until silence returned to the pass. Every single one of the 300 Spartans died. Thespians died. The resistance was wiped out.
Standing there, looking at the aftermath, it looks like a tragedy, a total defeat. Xerxes marched through the pass. He marched down into Greece. He burned Athens to the ground. If you stop the story there, it looks like the sacrifice was for nothing.
But you can't stop the story there. This is the core of the deep dive. You have to ask. So what? What did those 3 days actually buy?
It bought time.
Precious, invaluable time. While the Spartans and Thespians held the pass, the city of Athens was evacuated. The people were moved to the island of Salamis.
So when Xerxes burned Athens,
He was burning empty buildings. The people, the soul of the city, were safe.
and more importantly, the Greek fleet, the Navy had time to mobilize.
That is the key. The stand at Thermopylae inspired the Greeks. It galvanized them. The Greek navy later lured the Persian fleet into the Straits of Salamis, another narrow choke point, and crushed them.
Another funnel.
And that naval victory broke the back of the invasion. Xerxes, afraid of being trapped in Europe without a navy to supply him, fled back to Asia.
So the sacrifice at the Hot Gates set the board for the battles that came later. Without Thermopylae, there is no Salamis. Without Salamis, Greece falls.
And if Greece falls, the birth of democracy, philosophy, the foundations of the Western world, they might have been extinguished right there.
That's why we call it a strategic victory in disguise. It looked like a loss on a day, but it was the key to winning the war.
It's interesting, isn't it? The Greeks won the war. They won other battles. But this battle, the one they lost, is the one we remember most vividly.
I think that speaks to something deep in the human psyche. We are drawn to the story of the beautiful failure.
There's something transcendent about fighting for what is right, even when you know survival is impossible. It's the ultimate definition of integrity. You aren't doing it for a reward. You aren't doing it to win. You are doing it because it is who you are.
There is a stone at the site today, isn't there, with an epitaph?
Yes. It was written by the poet Simonides. It is incredibly simple, but it captures everything we've talked about. It reads, "Go tell the Spartans, stranger passing by, that here obedient to their laws we lie."
Obedient to their laws, not to a king, not to a general, to their own code.
To their promise. They said they would hold the pass, and they did.
As we close this deep dive, we want to leave you with a thought to carry into the night. We often think of victory as standing on top of the mountain, holding the trophy, but sometimes victory is quieter.
Sometimes, victory isn't about whether you survive the day. It's about what you enable for others. It's about the people who get to go home because you stood your ground.
The 300 didn't see the victory, but their sons did. And maybe that was enough.
It's a powerful legacy. A reminder that even in the face of overwhelming odds, a small group of people, united by purpose, can change the course of history.
Thank you for joining us on this quiet journey back to the ancient world. We hope it gave you something to think about as you unwind.
Sleep well. And remember, history is never as far away as it seems.